Okay, is it live? We're still setting up the. All right. So now I think I can close the YouTube. Okay. We'll start the webinar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Salvatore Pinizzotto. I am the Secretary General at the International Rubber Study Group, and I would really welcome you at this event that IRSG has organized together with CIFOR-FTA and the International Rubber Research and Development Board. We are going to have 1 hour and a half to spend together during this event, and we are going to have a lot of speakers, so without any doubt, I would like to invite Robert Nasi, Director General of CIFOR, for a welcome address. Robert.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, and for the people here in Seoul, and mostly also for the people online. I'm particularly happy to welcome you to this event, which is co-organized by the International Rubber Study Group, the International Rubber Research and Development Board, and CIFOR-ICRAF on promoting green economic growth in natural rubber system and beyond. So why is it important to discuss about that? I mean, first about, we are in a sort of a very traditional forestry forum. I mean, a sort of, here in Seoul, you have forester talking to forester. And I think I remember a comment by a colleague, I mean, it's sort of, out of the 4 big commodities, the one that is closest to a forest is rubber. Oil palm is not a tree, and cocoa and coffee, it's a bit different. So, and rubber is originally a non-timber forest product that were harvested in the natural forest in Amazonia, and it also a different characteristic compared to many of the other large commodities. 85% is produced by smallholders in 6 countries. 95% of the rubber is probably produced in these 6 countries. And so rubber is a tree, it produces rubber trees. A tree, it produces rubber, and it produces timber also. And so there is a potential for rubber to play a role in terms of adaptation and mitigation of climate change, producing renewable material, rubber and wood, and also having an importance in the economy and the livelihood of many people, of millions of smallholders. And this is something that is not really properly accounted for. And I think it's a bit of a pity, because it will be very important and interesting. And it will allow us to look at trees being more than simply sticks of carbon. And if we want to transition to a bioeconomy, that means replacing fossil fuel-based product by bio-based product. I mean, a sort of, you all know that we have natural rubber and synthetic rubber. I mean, a sort of, I have specialists here, but I think that the natural rubber is something like 45% of the consumption. And I think that there is a role for more natural rubber produced by a tree as a renewable material, compared to a synthetic rubber produced from fossil fuel as a non-renewable. And we all know that fossil fuels, they are better in the ground than in the air. And third, for people we look at it, I mean, a sort of, there is an impressive array of people in the room and online that will explain us how we can move into a sustainable rubber. It's not to say that there is no problem with rubber. We moved from 5 million hectares to more than 11 million hectares in 10 years. In some places, I mean, some forests have been cut to put rubber, but ultimately, I think that rubber is one of the commodities that has the potential to be sustainable. But I think there's also a commodity that is missing some sort of overarching certification or sustainability standard that something that will allow maybe like the RSPO or something better for rubber that will allow to have a sustainable rubber brand delivered to the market and getting. So a lot of potential, and I'm very pleased to have this here, and I will stop and really listen to the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, for this introduction. And now I would like to invite Dr. Abdul Aziz, Secretary General IRRDB, to give a welcome address. Dr. Aziz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, first, on behalf of the board and directors of the IRRDB member institutes, some 22 member countries, I would like to express our appreciation and thanks to the organizers for this opportunity to highlight the important role of the smallholders in ensuring the success of the green economy for natural rubber now and into the future. The most important role of the smallholders is to continue producing rubber. Even though the last decade has been very challenging, not to talk about the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the climate change situations where, unpredictable weather events affected the productivity of the rubber smallholdings. So it is important that the smallholders be rewarded. There should be a remunerative price for them to continue producing their rubber. Although, if we look at the last decade, price has not been very good, very low price, but the smallholders continue to produce this important industrial raw material. So what is important now with the climate change incidents, increasing incidents of important diseases, especially the latest that we have now is Pestalotiopsis, important leaf disease that's causing a decrease in productivity at least to about 20% in many countries now, from Malaysia, Indonesia, is also in Sri Lanka, Thailand. And then what we need to highlight now, the focus of the IRRDB is to continue the research and development activities. Most important is breeding for high yield latex, high yield wood, and disease resistant clones of rubber, which through the IRRDB now we are making exchanges, free exchange of rubber clones to all the IRRDB member countries, involving some 49 clones. So what I would like to highlight here is the IRRDB will continue to focus on the research priority areas such as breeding, rubber modification, rubber technology, because natural rubber is utilized in some 40,000 over products. And there are millions of smallholders, more than 40 to 50 million of smallholders and their families who are dependent on this crop. So it is important that both the consumers and those who are actually projecting the important role of planting rubber in terms of mitigation of the climate change, that smallholders should be given remunerative price. They have continued to produce even though the price has not been remunerative. So now it is time to ensure the success of the green economy now into the future, especially when we are talking about the problem with the fossil fuel and all these things. So there is expected to be increasing demand for this important industrial raw material. We should look after the interests of the smallholders who are the predominant producers of this commodity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aziz, for this introduction. Now it's the time for the first presentation. I'm glad to introduce Dr. Raghavan, that is the Executive Director of Rubber Board of India, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. He's also chairperson of the International Rubber Study Group. So, Dr. Raghavan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore. Good morning to all of you. Good afternoon to those of you across the noon time. I'll introduce myself. I am Dr. Raghavan. I'm Executive Director of Rubber Board of India. And I brought a small presentation with me, which I'll be sharing with you. So I'll go through a presentation, and probably after that we can have a Q&A session. Two interesting points were raised during the introductions by Mr. Robert and Dr. Aziz. Mr. Robert pointed out that rubber is closest to the forest, and Dr. Aziz mentioned about the need for having a remunerative price, both of which are very important aspects when you look at the picture of climate change and sustainability. So I'll come to the presentation proper. Climate change mitigation is basically the sum total of actions taken to minimize the intensity of climate change and to protect global ecosystems. So sustainability is one particular and important component of this. In as much as what is sustainability? Sustainability essentially means what do we leave to the future generation? Is it something better than what we inherited or something worse of that? And what will be the role of natural rubber in that? Coming to the Indian scenario, we have around 827,000 hectares of planted area. The tappable area is roughly around 700,000 hectares. And it is a smallholders crop. World over, if 85% of the holdings are with smallholders, in India, 91% of the holdings are with smallholders. And the average size of the holdings is 0.57 hectares. I would also like to say that in India, the rubber that is produced, about 75 to 80% of the rubber that is produced is in the sheet rubber form. So basically, the smallholders have the farms in which they get the latex and they convert the latex into rubber sheets, either through a homestead approach or to a collective where the processing takes place. So all these activities take place with a minimal amount of machinery and with minimal interference with the nature. We have in India a Rubber Research Institute of India, which is working with the rubber board, and that is headquartered at Kottayam. This research institute has been functioning from 1955. I have with me Dr. Jesse, who is the director of the institute, and they have been doing a lot of research and studies into various aspects of the rubber plantations. They have developed clones, they have developed genetically modified rubber, and there is a division there which looks at the impact of climate change also. So whatever are the findings in the presentations are essentially the findings of the studies and research which is done by the RRI. Now, first is the carbon sequestration potential of NR. We have studied this using the eddy covariance technique by measuring the canopy level carbon dioxide flux. So, and estimated that the mean net ecosystem exchange is determined as 32 metric tons carbon dioxide per hectare per year. Now, this is what we have found out through our studies here. So roughly, if you look at it, the NR plantation in India release around 11.6 million tons of oxygen every year and sequesters around 16 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. So these are the broad figures. These plantations actually take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen in the quantities that are mentioned on the screen. More importantly, we have a comparison between NR and SR. We all know that NR is a natural product, SR is synthetic. But let us look at the quantum of NR, the carbon dioxide that NR sequesters, and the quantum of carbon dioxide that SR releases. Now, for producing 1 ton of NR, sequestration is almost 10 metric tons of carbon dioxide. While you produce 1 ton of SR, synthetic rubber, it is a release of 10 to 15 tons of carbon dioxide. So that is a comparison. So we need to produce, if you want to have a sustainable environment, if you want to mitigate the impact of climate change, we should be...
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Could you share your presentation slides? As in, no, sorry, as in presentation mode. Presentation mode. Your slides are not like moving, are not changing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry.
I'll just have it reloaded.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Thank you. In a presentation mode. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you can click the Yeah. Okay.
Can you see the second slide now?
The third slide now. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, this is what I was.
You want to make it into a full presentation mode?
Yeah, make it into full screen mode.
Full screen. Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Not yet in full screen, but we can see your presentation. It's not in a slide mode. Yeah.
Because we can see it in full screen here. So that's.
Oh, okay. It's not full screen here.
It's still better than before. It's okay. We can see the slides as long as
Okay.
you scroll down the slides while you speak, because we were stuck on the first slide.
Oh,
on
no,
the
no,
title.
we are on the, do you want me to go back to the second slide?
No, it's okay. You can
yeah.
continue from here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
This is the third slide. So this is what I was explaining, the comparison between the production of NR and the production of SR. And while NR produces or 1 metric ton of production of NR results in sequestering of around 10 metric tons of carbon dioxide, production of 1 metric ton of SR results in release of 10 to 15 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So if you want a cleaner environment, if you want a more sustainable future, if you want to mitigate the impact of climate change, well, we will have to minimize the production of synthetic rubber and maximize the production of natural rubber. Next slide, please. Can you see this? I hope you can. Next slide. Can you see the next slide?
No,
Organic.
we're still on slide number 3. You should move to slide number 4.
One second, let me just reload it. Can you just reload the...
Okay, now it's 4. Now it's good.
Yeah, okay. This is organic carbon in soil. We have done about the how the rubber plantations impact the organic carbon content of the soil, and found that actually the organic carbon content improves due to the leaf litter addition. And our studies show that around there's 10 to 20% increase in the organic carbon content of the soil over a planting time, which will take us about 30 years. Next. And this is a water use efficiency of rubber trees. This is significant so far as the water mining rate, which we studied using the SAP flow system. This is a real-time study and not based on estimates or anything. The real-time study in which we fit the instrument concerned onto the trunk of the rubber tree and measure the water mining rate. We have compared it with the other crops that is grown in the main rubber growing area in India, which is Kerala, the southern state of the country. So the alternate crops that are grown, one is coconut, which is quite broadly cultivated in the state, and the other two, acacia and eucalyptus, are what are grown through the social forestry department. So we find that actually the water mining efficiency of rubber is much higher when compared to coconut, acacia and eucalyptus. For rubber, it is only about 20 to 25 kg of water per tree per day, whereas for coconut and acacia and eucalyptus, it's much more. So the water use efficiency is also higher as so far as rubber trees are concerned. Next. Carbon footprint of rubber plantation. Again, what will be the total carbon emission from a rubber plant, a rubber farm, and from the processing units? Because as I said, in India, the processing is from latex to sheet rubber. Very little of the block rubber is made from the couplums. So what we found is that during the life cycle, 27 metric tons of carbon dioxide is emitted from a rubber farm. When you compare it with 32 metric tons per year, which is sequestered, the emission is very small. And the emission from processing unit, which basically converts the latex into sheet, is only 25 metric tons per hectare per cycle. And this low emission is due to very low fertilizer requirement. Actually, in India, the rubber plantations need very low fertilizer requirement because rubber is planted only in soil which is favorable for the cultivation. And the other planting and agriculture practices are not a big source of greenhouse gases emission. Next. Biodiversity. Initially, NR was recommended as a monoculture crop. So we did not recommend planting of other trees or crops in rubber plantations. But now intercropping has been recommended for two reasons. One, to promote biodiversity. Second, it promotes an alternate source of revenue also. Because the cyclical pattern of the rubber prices, where you have a high for a decade followed by a low during the next decade, the farmer needs to have some cushioning against the vagaries of the fluctuating prices. So we are recommended intercropping with medicinal plants, food crops, fruits. Common ones are pineapple, we are recommended cocoa, we are recommended coffee, and medicinal plants are a good source of revenue also for the farmer. So these are NR-based homestead farming systems, and it improves the biodiversity and improves the soil health. And that again contributes to mitigating the climate change impact. Next. Soil health. There is minimum tillage of the soil while planting rubber sapling. Normally it is done by manual labor. Occasionally we use machines also, but mostly it is still done because as smallholders crop, they cannot afford machines is one reason. Second, for them, that's when they do the pitting and others by themselves, the conservation of soil also is ensured. And it sustains the soil health because less fertilizers are also used. As I mentioned, in India, the use of fertilizers for rubber plantation is minimal. These are the advantages, whatever I said now. Substantive carbon sequestration, sustaining soil health, low inputs, better water use efficiency, supports biodiversity, and less carbon footprint. Now, so far as India is concerned, we meet the sustainable development goals because we don't cut down forests and plant rubber. Rubber is planted in area where the replacement is normally with, like I said, in Kerala, coconut trees have been replaced by rubber. Bamboo has been replaced by rubber. We don't cut down forests and grow rubber plantation. We don't have use of child labor in any other plantation in the country. We follow the good agriculture practices which are recommended. Some of them I can list out. One is rain gardening. We have popularized rain gardening because at least 4 to 5 months we have monsoons, particularly in the rubber growing areas in the South India. Second, we have recommended low frequency tapping system, which means that the farmer needs to tap only once a week, and the quantum of latex produced is almost the same if you do that. So low frequency tapping has been recommended. Self tapping has been recommended. We give some financial incentive for people who do self tapping and low frequency tapping. We are looking at inclusive growth and social security. Now, rubber has played a big role in actually rehabilitating the tribal plantations. They used to, in the northeastern state of Tripura, there was a practice of June, in which people used to, it was a moving tribal settlement. They used to settle down one area, burn the forest, live there for some time, then move to other area. So it played havoc with the environment. But after the rubber plantations were introduced in Tripura, they all settled down, and that is not only helped them financially and help them move up the social ladder, but also help to conserve the environment in that part. So it is used for as a social security measure and also for promoting inclusive growth in the country. Next, the way forward. Now, the advantages of rubber as a green crop has not been properly acknowledged as it. This is a sad truth because rubber ultimately is an industrial raw material. So the green credentials are not always identified. Now, not many people know about the advantages of natural rubber besides the synthetic rubber. How it impacts the environment. What is the advantage? How much carbon dioxide is sequestered when natural rubber is produced? How much carbon dioxide is released when synthetic rubber is produced? This has not been understood properly. Second, we need to, if you're working towards reducing the carbon footprint, we need to promote natural rubber. And it can be used. Now, we should not be growing this purely as a crop for producing industrial raw material. It should be part of the reforestation programs, the greening programs, rejuvenation programs. Now we have river rejuvenation programs. We can have rubber planted there. There's soil conservation happening there. Any other rejuvenation programs that happens, we can actually use rubber. Social forestry, instead of planting acacia and eucalyptus as we've done in the past, we are recommending that natural rubber should be planted. So if you bring in a lot of these policy interventions into the book, then there is much better scope for increasing the area under cultivation. The bottom line ultimately is that the farmer should get a remunerative price. This is where the government intervention is also required. When the prices fall below a certain level, the farmer finds it unremunerative to produce rubber. So we had a situation in India where a lot of farms were left untapped. So Kerala, one of the state governments had introduced a policy for providing incentive for rubber production. And then we, from the rubber board side, had adopted a policy of adopting farms which are left untapped so that we could continue to produce rubber from them so that it did not lie idle. So these sort of policy interventions are also required if you have to sustain rubber plantations and make it into a viable alternative for greening up of the country and of the world. So this is a brief presentation from my side. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. I'll be ready to take questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan, for this interesting presentation. You point out a few important elements in there, and also you introduced a topic that is climate change and natural rubber systems and how they interact. And I think the second presentation of Thierry, Chief Technical Officer, Natural Rubber of Michelin, will present an industry perspective also on this topic. Thierry?
Yeah, good day, everyone. Thank you very much for hosting me at the WFC. Hopefully you can see my screen, and please confirm slides are moving correctly. So thank you, Salvatore. My name is Thierry, as you said. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Michelin, and my presentation will be about climate change resilience and mitigation indeed. Is it okay for the slides?
We can see it, yes.
Okay, very good. Well, so starting with a few important background information. Well, you might be knowing, but we have about 6 billion rubber trees planted on Earth, so almost as many rubber trees as human beings on this planet. And as previously said, it is an absolute key material for the tire industry, which accounts for 75% of the natural rubber consumption, but also for numerous applications. So we have thousands of applications using natural rubber. There will be, and there is already, a growing demand for sustainable raw materials. And as an example, I just give you an example of what is Michelin commitment in terms of a sustainable material rate in our tires. So in 2021, let's say today, we have about 29% of sustainable raw materials in tires, and mostly natural rubber, with a commitment of growing to 40% by 2030 and 100% by calendar year 2050. And all tire makers are making similar commitment. And at the same time, they are all racing, we are all racing to net zero, as said before. And as Dr. Aziz said in his initial words, global warming will impact the rubber industry. And that's why resilience to climate change and mitigating climate change impact is so important. So moving to next slide, I would like to show you how climate change could impact the yields and what we call the viable marginal zones for rubber cultivation. So we did an exercise combining the IPCC model. You all know about the 5 scenarios just released by the IPCC, and crossing that or combining that with a rubber model, which has been developed by the teams of CIRAD and particularly Dr. Goe in a publication made in 2015. So that rubber model will key in different parameters like the rainfall, the temperature index, either low or high temperature, the duration of the dry season, the thermal amplitude, the occurrence of leaf disease, and all of that will lead to what we call a climate marginality index for rubber trees. And you have an example on the map on the right side with the baseline today, where can we grow rubber? So the darker the color, the most favorable the zone. So that's for the world. You can have it for country by country. This is the example of Thailand. This is one as an example in Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire. And this is a baseline today. What we are presently doing is to process the data, the predictive data from 2020 up to calendar year 2100, so that we have a good projection of what will be the climate condition in the next decades and how we should adapt and become more resilient. So how to be resilient is the next question. So what I show you today is a model. And what is important, every model is fed with assumptions. And these assumptions have to be science-based. And particularly for the rubber model, what will be important is to understand how the rubber tree will behave when the average annual temperature will go beyond 28 degrees C, which is the known limit today. And after which we enter into big question marks about what will be the impact on the yield and the growth of rubber trees. So we need more science on that very parameters. What is true as well, Dr. Aziz was mentioning about the IRRDB clonal exchange. It will be very important to invest and to develop better genetic material for better tolerance to higher temperature, water stress, and leaf diseases. And what will be important as well is to test the rubber varieties in the projected climate conditions, not in the one we are facing today. As already mentioned as well, the yield improvement is absolutely key because we need to get the rubber we need on less land because the competition for the access to land will become more and more critical. And the productivity increase is also of prior importance, and it can be achieved through low frequency tapping, as Mr. Raghavan was mentioning. We can tap the rubber today once a week and get a similar yield as in D2 or D4. How to achieve it? Through a large dissemination of high-performing material, vegetal material, and the good agricultural practices. At country level, what will be important is to exercise a proper land use planification, taking into account that predictive climate change model. So that will be important. And last but not least, giving you an industry perspective, the more efficient the raw material we use in our tires, the better, because if we can achieve lighter tires, longer lasting tires, it will have a huge impact on the raw mat consumption, and the pressure on the use of raw material, natural rubber in particular, will be lesser. But climate change resilience is very important, but not enough. And as said in the previous presentation as well, our priority will be to contribute to the mitigation of climate change impact. And although the rubber tree contribute to carbon sequestration, our value chain also is also emitting CO2 or CO2 equivalent gases, and our priority is to reduce emissions from the very upstream portion of the value chain till the end of the value chain through efficient tires or efficient rubber shipping. So I will focus on the very upstream part related to rubber farming and rubber processing. And I would like to mention that we just developed what we call a farm-to-fork carbon calculator following the GHG protocol, and that will help have an excellent view of where we can act to reduce our emission. So focusing on the rubber farming. So today, it depends on the country and the farming system you are using, but you can emit up to 600 kilo of carbon dioxide equivalent per ton of rubber produced. And the road towards net zero farming is very much achievable. How to do it? With a yield improvement. The higher the yield, the lower the carbon footprint. Of course, no deforestation or no negative land use change. A reduced use of fertilizer, particularly nitrogen fertilizer. How to achieve it with no tilling, no bare soil, a smart use of a legume cover crop, limit the mechanization and the need for transportation. On the processing side, today, if you want to produce a ton of natural rubber, your energy consumption will be around 2 gigajoule per ton of natural rubber through electricity or LPG. And it is highly achievable to reduce that footprint by about 30%, and also to move to cleaner energy, decarbonized energy, because in some of the producing country, what we call the emission factor to produce electricity is pretty bad, and that's a very important direction to decarbonize that electricity. The wastewater treatment is not marginal because it can emit methane, also contributing to climate change. So I just wanted to share some of the directions we could activate to reduce our footprint. And the carbon calculator, which we just developed jointly with some industry partners, could become a standard of the industry and help support that important ambition. So basically, that was my message today. The world will need natural rubber, but we need to anticipate changes, climate change impact, and to adapt our practices. So thank you again for your attention, and well, open to all of your questions. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Thierry. Very interesting presentation. I would say you put 2030 ambition. 2030 is now very close, and I think we need to work hard to achieve those targets. Now I would like to open a short Q&A session. So if there is anyone here present here or also online that would like to ask some questions to our speakers. Richard.
Yes, hi, it's Richard Laity here, PFC International Southeast Asia Manager for Thierry. I was wondering about the commitment to the sustainable rubber materials. Could you give us some more information about how you're defining sustainability and what are the current sustainability frameworks that you're using to be able to deliver this very ambitious statement or commitment, I should say?
Thierry, you would like to answer to this?
Well, I can start, and Salvatore and other people in the room, feel free to complete my answer. First, I would like to say that road towards sustainability is not the Michelin's one or any individual effort, but it is a collective road we need to all embrace. And we are glad to have the global platform for sustainable natural rubber, which has been incorporated a couple of years ago, I think it was 2017 or 2018, for all stakeholders in the value chain joining forces and defining the criteria for sustainability and the main action items to be implemented. So what I wanted to show you today is just an angle about the impact of climate change we need to anticipate, and the priority we should be giving to climate mitigation through the reduction of CO2 emission. So yes, that's really ambitious. That's only one angle. We have a lot of other aspects, including a social aspect, which I just mentioned through the low frequency tapping, for instance. But the global platform is there to define a common platform about what we call sustainability for natural rubber. And what I presented today is really one highlight about carbon emission reduction. So Salvatore, feel free to complete, and hope it can answer to your question.
No, thank you so much. No, I just want to point out anyway that on this topic of climate change and natural rubber systems, IRSG has done a lot of work since June 2020 with CIFOR-FTA and with IRRDB and CIRAD as well. So there are a lot of publications and articles, and also we presented two papers in this conference that can be downloaded certainly from the IRSG website. They are there, and these papers have been shared with all the stakeholders in the natural rubber sector. So I think it's very important that the sector actually work together on this topic and share as much information as possible. I have one question for Dr. Raghavan, a quick one, because he was mentioning that the sector should promote the green credential of natural rubber, and any suggestion on how we can do that, Dr. Raghavan, please?
Yeah, thank you. No, one would be the impressing upon the respective governments to have some sort of incentive for natural rubber and to a disincentive for the synthetic rubber. This is something which is very important because this should, whatever is the incentive to natural rubber should go into a sort of a fund which would help the growers during the times and the price falls below what is remunerative for them. Right now, this is treated only as an industrial raw material. And as per the dictates of the markets, the prices keep fluctuating. Now, but if it's also treated as an important element in the climate change mitigation program, then its relevance becomes much broader than being limited to being a industrial raw material. It is this sort of policy change that is required on that. On the one hand, we need to adopt the elements of traceability to ensure that the practices followed are sustainable. On the other hand, we also need to bring in policy initiatives so that the green credentials get the necessary recognition. And we'll have to take up with the UNCCC also so that the prevailing norms are changed and that it acts in a way to encourage the increased cultivation of natural rubber, keeping in mind its green credentials. I hope I satisfy your question or I clarified.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan. Thank you so much. Okay, I think now we can close this. There is, okay. Okay, there is a question from James Griffith saying, is the GPSNR linking downstream producers to upstream OEM manufacturers the optimal stakeholder platform to deliver a remunerative price for natural rubber to smallholder and mitigate the intensity of climate change? If not, what type of platform and programs are required? I'm not so sure if Thierry wants to answer to this one, or if Dr. Raghavan wants to answer this.
I'll just see the question. It has not come out clearly. Let me just check it out and highlight
it. This is Thierry speaking. I can give a try. I see two questions indeed in the flow. One is about certification systems, and the second one by James is about price for natural rubber to smallholders. So starting with question number one, well, I'm not sure certification is the best way to achieve sustainability. It's one way for sure, but as said before, we have like more than 6 million smallholders producing natural rubber, and certification might not be able to address the totality of the stakeholders. So it could be part of the answer, and well, FSC could be one answer. But if we want to address a larger number of people, we could, and that's our policy today, start with a risk mapping. So we developed an application for that, and then after trying to mitigate the risks through capacity building actions. So that could be a way to address the issue with a larger number of people. About pricing, I think GPSNR is a platform linking producers, manufacturers, end users, NGOs, civil society. So that's a very good place to define sustainability criteria. This is not a platform to discuss about rubber pricing today, which is mostly driven by demand and supply. But yes, I mean, for sure, we need to incentivize the players who are playing a very positive role to mitigate the intensity of climate change or whatever. But that platform is meant to mostly define the criteria and adopt a common policy. So maybe you can complete my answer.
Maybe Thierry, we can say
Salvatore, I would just like to add one point on that.
Okay.
Yeah, GPSNR certainly offers a very important and valuable platform. But to get the message down to this, as you said, it's a smallholders crop. When you're linking the smallholders with the manufacturers, the end users, and bringing the other stakeholders in, we should not underestimate the role of the national bodies that can play. Because you can see that the growth, rubber is cultivated in certain countries. It's not cultivated in all countries. There, the national bodies have a very important role in promoting the cultivation of rubber, in channelizing the use of rubber, in identifying the land, and in promoting good agriculture practices. So the national bodies also should be an important stakeholder in the mechanism that links the growers with the end users and the manufacturers. So while GPSNR offers a good platform globally, we should also ensure that there should be similar certification bodies at the national level, which are accredited. Then only will we be able to have a wholesome development in the sector and have a platform which is broad enough to accommodate all sectors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Raghavan. Your point are very well received. And okay, I think now we can move forward with our panel discussion and the panelists that are online and here also in Seoul. And I would like to ask Dr. Aziz, Secretary General of IRRDB, to make a 3 minutes statement, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salvatore. Ladies and gentlemen, first, I'd like to mention that, you know, the rubber tree is very unique. Region here, Thailand, India, and the other countries, around February, March, the leaves turn brown and then drop. And this is important because it can affect microclimate change. Example to quote is Central Vietnam. When they started growing rubber, and then with the wintering everything, there is an improvement in number one, the organic matter of the soil. Second, even the microclimate in the area improves. So that is number one. Number two, I like to emphasize, we are only dealing with Hevea brasiliensis. There are 9 other species of rubber which is untouched. And this is what we are trying to do now. We have carried out expeditions into the Amazon jungle of Brazil, and we are planning one into Peru to collect the Hevea species. So provide an opportunity, because the focus in the IRRDB now is breeding for high yield of both latex, timber, and also disease resistant. So we have to make use of these different species where they provide a very healthy pool of germplasm. And this is one area. And then the other thing, cultivating rubber provides an opportunity for the smallholders. You know, rubber is a very generous crop. The area, if you put the planting distance, you can put in bananas, you can put in sugarcane, papaya, because the age of the plants, by the time they need to tap, it can take 6 years, 7 years in the case of smallholding. But if they do practice intercropping, they are likely to visit their holdings more frequently. So the rubber trees will also benefit by this frequent visit. So this is one area of importance where no other crop can provide that sort of intercropping or generosity of the trees to share that piece of land, very limited, uneconomic size of the small holdings, and yet other crops can be put, because this will supplement the income of the smallholders. Not many countries provide support for planting materials. Some countries, they do provide assistance. Others, the smallholders have got to do their own, and it's a heavy investment. And then later on, when you tap, when the price is good, you encourage them to actually stimulate the trees. They cannot afford fertilizers, they can't afford the stimulant, so they are stuck in this poverty trap. So I think it is our responsibility, our duty, and I'm very happy that Dr. Raghavan mentioned, sometime when we have this new initiative, we forget that governments invest millions. You know, for example, Sri Lanka is the oldest rubber research institute, 1909. It is still in existence, and the government is still injecting funds. Some of the smallholders, they are not very happy with the consumers. I've got to be very frank here. You ask them to do this, to do that, improve quality. It seems to be that never ending. But there is no reward for whatever changes they make. They produce the best quality, the price remains low. So this, you know, you talk about sustainability, it is people, planet, price, all these are important. So smallholders are still in the poverty group. So one way of helping them to ensure that in the future, we have people who are still interested to grow this rubber. Otherwise, it will become very, very expensive in the future. So help the smallholders and provide the assistance. For example, the intervention by government mentioned by Dr. Raghavan. In Malaysia, there are months that we cannot tap. So government provides some assistance to the smallholders. In terms of the research.
Can you close? Can you close your talk?
Okay, I will close by saying that it is the focus on the R&D. You know, 3 minutes is very short for the IRRDB to talk about the research, everything. So it is important that the consumers also realize that you need the material. You cannot continue to have it produced when the price continues to be low. And as far as the IRRDB is concerned, we are working on different plans and also trying to encourage smallholders for value addition. Through their co-op, they should manufacture something. So these are efforts that consumers should come together because you need that raw material. Certainly, quality rubber is needed for very good tires. So please work closely with the smallholders. That's good enough for that time being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aziz. IRRDB has done a great job actually over the years and continues to do so. So we certainly collaborate with IRRDB to have better clones and better rubber. So, but you mentioned Amazon, and no, we are very glad to have here a Brazilian expert, Diogo Esperante, that is executive director of APABOR. And APABOR is also an IRSG industry members. So we are very glad to have you here. Diogo, please.
Okay, hello, Salvatore, thank you. Well, I don't know if I can share here my screen, just a second, let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so 3 minutes. Let's try to do this. So hello everybody, my name is Diogo Esperante. I'm executive director of APABOR. We are the Association of Natural Rubber Producers and Processing Plants here in Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about sustainable natural rubber, obviously in our perspective. In 3 minutes, obviously, I won't be able to give a wide scope of the current status and opportunities for that subject, but I will try at least to share some of the opportunities that we are looking in now in our region, and that might serve as an example of a way forward. So here in Brazil, basically, we were talking about Amazon, but sadly, I have to inform you guys that basically we don't produce any more natural rubber in the Amazon as of now. We produce about 100 tons a year, and the national production in Brazil is about 200,000 tons. So basically, where we produce all that rubber, 66%, 67% in São Paulo, where I am here now, talking to you guys, and other neighboring states such as Goiás, Mato Grosso do Sul, Minas Gerais, and other states such as Bahia and Mato Grosso, but in the last years have been their production. And what we have as an opportunity in those regions regarding sustainability is that of an impact that it was not caused by rubber production, but by cattle pasture. We have in those regions where we call the Brazilian savanna about 30 million hectares of degraded cattle pasture. In the main areas where we produce rubber, São Paulo, Mato Grosso do Sul, Minas Gerais, Goiás, we have about 20 million hectares of degraded cattle pasture. And why I'm saying that is an opportunity, because, for instance, in São Paulo, where we have 67% of all the production, 80% of all processing plants, 90% of all industrial consumption, we've been planting natural rubber basically upon those areas of degraded cattle pasture. And there is a legislation in Brazil that also obligates producers to have 20% of their land into natural forests. And there is this opportunity of intercropping natural rubber with natural forests within those regions. So if we take alone the 133,000 hectares that we have of rubber in São Paulo, and we would add another 20% of what we call reservas legais with intercropping of natural forest with natural rubber, then we would have an additional 26,000 hectares of natural rubber intercropped with natural forests, and obviously bringing all benefits, sustainable benefits, not only environmental, but obviously economical and social, because we would be benefiting the local communities with it. So this is one of the opportunities that we're looking at. Our action plan right now with this is we are creating common funds of interested agents within our rubber industry to help finance these investments. There are already some companies, and interesting to say, not only companies related to rubber industry, but companies in other sectors that are looking into and are interested in financing planting forests intercropped with natural rubber here in the region. So this is just a small portion of some of the things that we're doing right here and that I wanted to share with you guys. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Diogo. Thank you very much for this introduction to Brazil and natural rubber in Brazil. Now I would like to ask Dian Sukmajaya, Senior Officer of Forestry of the Asian Secretariat, to provide his presentation. Dian?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to the organizer for inviting the ASEAN Secretariat to this very important event during in conjunction with World Forestry Congress. I just would like to briefly present the overview of natural rubber dialogue in ASEAN, touch upon on the brief figures on natural rubber in the region. I think you may already know that traded value of natural rubber in ASEAN, ASEAN to global in 2018 has recorded to 12 billion US dollar, and it was decreased into 11 billion US dollar in 2020. Perhaps not sure very much, but perhaps due to the COVID pandemic 19. And the export value from ASEAN to the global in 2020 recorded to 9 billion US dollar. However, it was decreased from about 11 billion US dollar in 2018, which is 18%. And you also may be aware than me that Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam is the main producer of natural rubber, contributed larger trading in the region as well as globally. And natural rubber, looking at those numbers, has been an important commodity actually for the region and supporting the economic growth of ASEAN member states. Just briefly, under our cooperation in agriculture and forestry, we have main sectors addressing issues related to the crops, livestock, fisheries, and forestry. But unfortunately, at the moment has yet discussed matters related to rubber or natural rubber under our sectors. Although I think it is surprisingly, although our ASEAN member states actually traded the natural rubber, including Singapore and 9 ASEAN member states produce natural rubber, but it is yet discussed at the regional level. I just would like to inform that under ASEAN economic ministers, we have the ASEAN Consultative Committee on Standard and Quality and a rubber-based product working group that oversee the development and implementation of mutual recognition arrangement and harmonized regulatory regimes related to the rubber overall, and also to identify standard for rubber and nature-based product for ASEAN to harmonize with international standard and quality. The ASEAN under the ACCSQ also has developed the ASEAN framework on rubber laboratory network. This is just to maintain and also ensure that the quality of rubber from this region is the best and also following the international standard. As I also learned from the previous speaker, there are some issues related to the natural rubber development in the region, including the Dr. Raghavan also mentioned about smallholders, how the policies can support smallholders' natural rubber production, and also how they can access to financing mechanism. The second is, of course, sustainability of natural rubber production, policy and tenure issues, always the challenge for this natural rubber development. And then in terms of technical low seedling qualities and regeneration, as mentioned by Dr. Aziz as well, I think smallholders need support for the best clone to be planted in this region. And then also in terms of sustainability, maintaining sustainability resources, still lack management skill for the smallholders. And then of course, climate change. Climate change impact has reduced the production and also might also cause pest and diseases outbreak. How the region could promote green economy growth in natural rubber system? I just would like to echo previous speakers that the natural rubber could improve livelihood of community living surrounding the forest and create job opportunity. Although the has yet intensively discussed at ASEAN, natural rubber has been an important commodity for the region and supporting its economic growth. And therefore, there are some potential window to promote sustainable agriculture in enhancing natural rubber production sustainably, and then encourage agroforestry practices in rubber plantation by mixing crops and the other rubbers and other food crops, while also maintaining biodiversity and ensuring people livelihood, and also, of course, maintain soil fertility. And there is also the need to create favorable policies and regulation to support sustainability of natural rubber and ensure land tenure security. Promote private sector engagement and support capacity building, also one of the important areas. Last but not least, at present, ASEAN is moving forward to promote sustainable agriculture and circularity, promote nature-based solution and decarbonization efforts, as well as carbon neutrality. And it is important to linkage those set of priorities in the region with sustainable natural rubber system. As potential windows for further discussion later, there is kind of available platform to promote dialogue on natural rubber, including the working group on social forestry. As Dr. Robert Nasi mentioned, rubber is considered also as non-timber forest product. I think through the working group on social forestry, we can further discuss this natural rubber system or mechanism. The second one is working group on forest product development. It is perhaps related to the utilization of rubber wood. With that, I concluded my presentation, and thank you, Dr. Salvatore. Back to you.
Thank you, Dian. Thank you very much for this introduction to the work that the Asian Secretariat is doing also on rubber. Now I would like to ask the first speaker in presence here, and that is Richard Laity, that we have seen before. He's Southeast Asia Manager from PEFC. Richard?
Thank you, and I hope I can put some slides up. I actually have a in-person interactive tool, but if my slides could be put up, I would like to just introduce about developing successful partnerships for quality infrastructure in ASEAN. and how we promote the green economy in natural rubber. And so I first would like to comment a little bit about what some of the previous speakers have said about GPSNR as being an inclusive platform. It doesn't allow governments and associations to be members of their platform, voting members. And so I would like to follow up the colleague from India's response that we need to include national approaches, and that Michelin also mentions FSC as a certification system. And this is impossible for some companies like in Vietnam, which is now excluding all of the smallholders from Vietnam, or at least 70% of the smallholders from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos to access markets. So these sorts of policies, we need to think about what is equitable in the rubber sector. So I would like to show that PFC has grown in Southeast Asia, with Thailand and Vietnam becoming members. We now have more than 60,000 tons of certified rubber in the market, going to Germany, going into electric cars, and we have about 200,000 hectares of rubber wood that is being used by the local furniture market in Vietnam. And we are working with the national standards in Thailand, and we have full support from the government, and which is a critical part of enabling sustainable rubber. So next slide, please. So yeah, I'd like to introduce this idea of building more confidence between the tree owners and the standard owners. And this is about our projects that we have, where we have support from PFC membership. We have 330 million hectares certified around the world. There's no reason why we cannot include the 11 million hectares of rubber. And so we are doing pilot projects. We are supporting quality infrastructure, so auditors, certification bodies, and accreditation bodies to be able to include smallholders into the certification. And we are having these conversations at the ASEAN level. And I am very happy that Dian was here, and he's mentioned some of the bodies that we've been working at, and a project that we have at ASEAN that can include rubber to be able to be part of the green economy that these companies and the stakeholders are asking. Next, please. So we have spent 5 years developing this in these forums, in the Asia Pacific Forestry Week, and building on the Pan-ASEAN Timber Certification Initiative. We have worked with the ASEAN Senior Officials of Forestry, and we have worked with the ASEAN Consultative Committee of Standards and Quality, which already have the rubber-based working groups. These government-run processes should not be excluded from these sustainability platforms. And so we are taking it on ourselves to develop a project that is led by Vietnam. We have been supported by UN Red, and we have mobilized it at the Lower Mekong region. Now we have the project approved at ASEAN, and I would ask you to get your QR code scanner out and be ready to give some feedback. For the next slide, please. That we would like, if you can, to scan this code next, because we want to implement this project, and it's a $2 million to $10 million project that is needed to support the CLM countries of ASEAN. And once we do ASEAN, we can move to the APEC level. And this is the bottom-up approach that PFC uses, which includes the cooperation with governments, research institutions, and the associations, which have been working for rubber and the rubber farmers for the last 100 years. And so PFC certification can help demonstrate the sustainable production. For example, the Vietnamese companies have been a case study for the ASEAN responsible investments of agriculture. And PFC can also be a way for the customers, such as Michelin, to be able to come and see the production and see what are our standards, what is the certification system, and being able to build confidence in a bottom-up approach to be able to address issues that the smallholders are facing and make sure that we can include them and not exclude them. And so that is my 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. Okay, now I would like to invite Mooi See Tor of Southeast Asia, Deputy Regional Director of Forest, to provide this talk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for the organizer inviting Forest to be part of this the event, the site events, in conjunction with the World Forestry Congress in Seoul, Korea. So it's my pleasure actually to share a few slides with you, very quick one. I hope you all can see it. Yeah, let me put it into a PowerPoint mode. Yeah, as a mission-driven organization, ProForest has been helping, I would say that all the private companies as well as stakeholders in supporting the transition to the agricultural commodities production and sourcing that deliver positive social and environmental outcomes for people and the planet. So in our work with all the stakeholders, we always deploy our theory of change, which is here that to share with you about how we work within the supply chain and beyond the supply chain. I think according to some of the speakers that mentioned the point, I think share with you, probably is fall under these two important components. Because as we know, for individual private companies like Michelin and some other private companies, they have to work with their suppliers regularly in order to collaborative and deliver their social and environmental commitments at all the volumes that they produce or buy, and then to work with their suppliers in the end to achieve the commitments that include the entire supply chain actors. I mean, of course, there will be some systemic issues that couldn't be addressed. Hence, why is that we promote actually the stakeholder and the companies to work beyond their supply chain through the landscape collaboration or sectoral initiative out there to actually address all these social and environmental issues that involve a series of different actors that fall within the same landscape or sector-wise approach. Well, in ProForest, we do the plot. We also have our IRSG approach, learning from our experience through working with various agricultural commodities such as palm oil, sugar, soy, and some others. So throughout that whole journey, we learn actually in order to achieve, I think, your own no deforestation or human rights, respect human rights commitments, you need to start with a systematic approach. From here, that actually the company or entity could start with having a strategy or policy commitment in place. And this included, you must have an action plan or implementation to guide you along that journey. And then throughout that, after you have such commitment, then it's really important for you to understand your own supply base. So hence why is that or companies talk about understanding through the traceability mechanism or even risk analysis they have in place. I mean, in order to understand and prioritize the next intervention with the suppliers and beyond the supply chain as well. And then obviously engagement is key here. Therefore, engagement within and beyond supply chain could actually bring a meaningful intervention to all the players that involve. And finally, not forget to mention the monitoring and reporting, which is also important to report your progress and demonstrate your commitments from time to time and achieve your milestone accordingly. So based on our experience, at this point of time, we observe there are some sustainability trends or movement that happening around the whole, I would say, rubber sectors. So from the strategy or policy wise that we learned, there are many companies now put in place their own no deforestation and respect human rights commitment And then after that, also carry out different, I think, traceability exercise and risk analysis or assessment within the supply chain. And through that, actually prioritize the suppliers, especially tier 1 suppliers they need to engage with. And then this is also important to provide capacity building for the smallholder and small medium enterprises through the responsible sourcing for smallholder framework or some other framework in place. And I would like to echo to some of the points bring up by the former speakers. I think almost everyone that say smallholder is very important in this sector. Hence why is that we couldn't actually ignore them and have to work with them closely moving forward. And beyond that, of course, we are looking at involving in jurisdictional or landscape approach, or even promote company collaboration moving forward. And then finally, it's about, again, monitoring and reporting. We know that there are many different mechanisms out there that could be actually deployed by or adopted by the companies altogether. Thank you. That's my sharing.
Thank you so much. Of course, now in natural rubber, you have some issues clearly, but I think no one of these issues could be solved if we don't get finance, right? Or some finance to do that. So I would like to invite Ben Vickers, Land Use, Forest and Ecosystem Senior Specialist at the Green Climate Fund, to provide his presentation, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. I am by no means a rubber expert, and I can basically try and build on what's been said already, and try and draw out what I feel may be relevant from the GCF perspective. We are, of course, at the GCF, we have a mandate to try to provide a balance in climate finance between adaptation and mitigation objectives. We also have the aim to scale up significantly over the coming years the proportion of the support that we provide or the funds that we disperse to the private sector. So with this in mind, one of the things I think I'd like to highlight, which I'm not sure we've really touched on so far, is the emergence of the zero deforestation policies from the supply side and in the Western world in particular. Rubber is now considered one of the 6 land-intensive commodities identified as a potential driver of forest loss. And in the emerging policy environment, in the UK, it's been identified in the draft environmental law as one of the potential commodities that will be focused on, as well as in the US, the draft Forest Act, which is aimed at promoting sustainable commodity imports to the US. At the moment, it's not named in the draft EU deforestation regulation, but this remains something that might happen in the future. So looking at this emerging policy environment, there is a very strong signal from the supply side that the production of commodities like rubber will need to adapt. And it's clear that from past experience, for example, with the timber sector, with the flag tea, the producer countries that are intended to provide this more sustainable supply chain to, say, the EU, UK, and US are going to need support to adapt their supply chains to these new market standards, or whatever policies that the consumer countries develop will not be implementable. We see at the moment that there's approximately, I found, 2.7% per annum growth in rubber consumption globally currently. There's no sign of that slowing. So particularly in Asia, with Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, China, Vietnam, Philippines being the top 7 rubber producer countries, as far as I could find out, this is going to be a real challenge. How are we going to keep that supply going and this increased demand, to meet the increased demand with these new challenging standards and policy environment? So we see at GCF, we certainly see opportunities to direct finance to producer countries, to provide the institutional and governance environment, and to enable the rubber industry and domestic rubber industries to contribute to these global mitigation objectives that the consumer countries are driving. But we also, of course, see the need, as was pointed out by previous speakers, for the domestic rubber industries to adapt to the climate situation. So the CIRAD research that was noted that there is going to be some need for rubber plantations themselves to adapt to changing precipitation, in temperature, exposure to new diseases, drops in productivity. So there is a need for finance to be directed to producer countries to help the rubber industry to adapt to this, become more resilient to this new climate reality. What I also would like to echo what other speakers have said is the importance of smallholders in this sector. It's clear that many a high proportion, particularly in Thailand and in Indonesia, of the rubber production is dependent on smallholders, family businesses. A lot of the employment that is dependent on the rubber sector is informal, but I couldn't really find, maybe other speakers have these figures, any firm figures at national or international level on the employment, on the amount of labor that is dependent on the rubber sector for livelihoods. When we're looking at adaptation objectives, this is absolutely crucial. So we would like to see some more information from the rubber sector, from stakeholders here about what is the employment situation, how it's likely to be affected in the coming years. Very encouraging to see the emergence of the GPSNR as a global platform for promoting sustainability in the rubber sector. Michelin is one of the companies that is aiming for increasing the proportion of its supply to be derived from the sustainable sources. But we would certainly see from GCF side a need to work with the private sector and the rubber industry in particular to accelerate these aims and speed up the rate at which rubber consumers are able to meet their 100% goal of sustainable sourcing in over the next decades. So there's certainly a large potential for work from the GCF side at least to work with the rubber sector and to work towards the increased contribution of the rubber sector towards both mitigation and adaptation goals. And we would welcome innovative proposals from both private and public side to help us do that.
Thank you so much, Ben. Very interesting talk, I think. You touched a few points that are very important. One of which is the lack of information, for instance. I think the sector should do more, especially on the social side. Now, I would like there should be a recorded short presentation from Emily Gallagher. She's an integrated rural development specialist, CIFOR. She will speak about gender equality and the role of women in the rubber sector.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Gallagher. I am a scientist for the Sustainable Value Chains and Investment team with CIFOR-ICRAF in Nairobi, Kenya. I have been asked to speak about gender and social inclusion to promote resilience and economic growth in the rubber industry. More specifically, how can we address barriers for more equitable and inclusive value chains for sustainable rubber, especially in relation to women? Although we know that rubber production is a male-dominated industry, we also know that women are active in rubber value chains and that there are different gendered norms between and even within countries. In some places, female labor is recognized and valued, and in other places it is invisible and oftentimes uncompensated. It is true that companies and CSOs are disrupting some of these gendered barriers in an effort to promote social inclusion, and that the International Rubber Study Group proposed steps to address inequality in the rubber value chain even pre-COVID in 2019. And yet more recent studies still show similar patterns. To answer the question about equity and social inclusion, we really have to address the different barriers for hired labor on estates and at the processing node, separate from smallholder production systems. The rubber industry has played a significant role in providing rural employment to men and women, including youth, and has made progress in some countries in building the capacities of women to take on tasks traditionally coded as male jobs through targeted skills training and human capital development. So in some cases, women form the bulk of the labor force, for example, in budding, but are not well represented as tappers, while in many Asian cases, women tappers are normalized. Companies which recognize and promote women publicly are working to transform gender norms. However, this only transfers the labor if it is not also accompanied by economic empowerment to transform gender norms around female control over income, decision-making capacity, and leadership. So with regards to safety and security, the industry can lead the way in developing social safeguards, sexual harassment policies, occupational health and safety standards, especially for pregnant women and nursing mothers. And where this happens, this has improved social acceptability of women working outside the home. Yet we still see that women need additional support to take on decision-making roles, to speak out, especially in cultural contexts where women are not active in the public sphere. This can come through promoting women to supervisory roles, creating women's committees and public programs, and having gender affirmative policies to have women represented at all levels. And when it comes to smallholder producers, there are additional barriers having to do with land and resource tenure and access to working capital to invest in the rubber farming system. The rubber industry can transform gender norms through capacity and skills building, recognizing female labor in the supply chain, promoting women's leadership opportunities, and economic empowerment through direct payment to women farmers. Where family farms are registered as part of outgrower schemes or farmers associations, it is necessary to render the invisible female labor visible by registering women and ensuring that they are represented in decision-making spaces, pursuing alternatives to land titles to allow female farmers to participate in outgrower schemes, and where possible, working with the development sector to provide gender-specific programming, financial literacy, and leadership training. So in answer to the question, equity and inclusion require some investment in gender-responsive strategies to build women's capacity to engage and men's acceptance of the shifting responsibilities. Thank you for listening, and thank you to our donor, the European Commission, and to our research partner in Ghana.
And thank you to Emily for her presentation. And last presentation is from Dr. Lekshmi Nair. She is Head of Economics and Statistics of IRSG. Lekshmi, 3 minutes, please.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. My former speakers, as well as panelists.
Lekshmi, can you put the presentation full screen, please?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm echoing with my previous speakers and fellow panelists, those who have pointed out on very challenging aspects of natural rubber and also the potential opportunity for natural rubber for greening the economy. Just to point out some basic facts before going into the work that IRSG Secretariat has done for climate change adaptation and mitigation specific to natural rubber. About 30 million tons produced globally, natural rubber is a key strategic material used in end user application ranging from toys, healthcare, mobility, construction, and aerospace. Many speakers previously mentioned that the importance of natural rubber being a naturally derived elastomer and the key importance of this raw material for greening the economy. Around 40% of the global rubber consumption is coming from natural sources. And geographically, both production and usage of natural rubber is concentrated in Asia Pacific region. The supply chain of natural rubber with the more than 30 million US dollar has a key role to play in both adaptation and mitigation of climate change. As an important land user, is already mentioned by Mooi See and Richard Laity, as a producer of renewable raw material, and of course, as a major economic activity, as this supply chain depends on more than 6 million of small growers who produce rubber and under challenging economic, social, and environmental conditions. IRSG has worked in collaboration with CIFOR-IRRDB and CIRAT for organizing a climate change workshop, and Secretariat has produced a policy paper addressing the climate change impact of natural rubber and how natural rubber can quickly adapt to the changes. We have seen that climate change is already impacting the rubber production. Science-based climate actions with the right policy tools, global rubber production can be safeguarded and sustainably increased on a lasting basis under climate change while contributing to climate mitigation goals. Focusing on the main aspect, the net zero transition in the natural rubber sector. The net zero transition is so important as it is the path to limit global temperature rises and to stave off the worst impact of the climate change. The global pandemic and the supply chain disruption provided both challenges, but also at the same time, it's provided opportunities for CO2 emission reduction in the supply chain of mobility, the main end user of rubber. Major business, economic and societal shift towards sustainable production and consumption, embracing the circular economy underlines the transition to 1.0 pathways. Effective uptake of sustainability, if you look at the rubber industry landscape, as previous speakers has rightly pointed out, both from an ecosystem health point of view, as well as from the socio-economic benefit, which is to be included of small farmers as well as small and medium enterprises. Demand-driven supply risk is limited. More action is required by companies focusing on restructuring their portfolios and actually reducing the emission in their extended supply chain. Governments and business need to act now with urgency and resolve, and to take a system-wide approach. And to do that, we need collaboration and working across both public and private sector. Spending on energy and land use system, as echoing with the previous speakers, need to increase substantially, and finance is needed to extend support for many of the value chain players to achieve net zero. Any assessment of GHG emission of the end user's supply chain under scope 3 should be done not in silos, as PFCs has rightly pointed out that both the supply chain responsible sourcing within the system and outside the system, a holistic approach on emission reduction of all raw material used in the end user application should be considered. So what are the action points we have discussed and concluded from the study we have undertaken and the result of the workshop we have done? The net zero emission pathways or transition towards green economy. Of course, the climate action need to be grounded on science, as Dr. Aziz has rightly pointed out on very elements of that, and Dr. Raghavan also mentioned on that. But that climate adaptive, resilient, and inclusive pathways for promoting the green economy, especially on the inclusive pathway, many speakers rightly echoed on the small grower inclusive approach that the system has to adopt, whether it is top-down approach or bottom-up approach, what is to be adopted. As Dr. Raghavan mentioned, okay, this is to have an inclusive approach of the region and the countries. Yes, it's the approach to be a bottom-up approach. But to move that bottom-up approach to adapt well to what the global requirement are to reach the net zero, so some level of harmonization need to be there from the country level approach to the global level approach. So to adopt to those changes, of course, what it is key is data. So climate scenario analytics of the countries or the regions or the companies, this is very much important for countries as well as companies to adopt policies aiming for net zero. Yes, Mr. Thierry has mentioned on coming up with a CO2 calculation metrics. Of course, that is important, but at the same time, traceability in the supply chain with the digitalization and with the needed supporting capacity building programs and the much needed finance is equally important to have an inclusive, resilient pathway for a green economy. So integrated approach is a requirement for broader sustainability dimension. It is not only natural rubber, other raw material which is going into the different application of the end users need to be taken into account. And the bioeconomy and the circular economy aspects is an integral part of aiming the net zero transition for natural rubber and the rubber economy, which we could attain only through collaboration. A holistic approach is needed with both producers and consumers, the government, civil society, and all the players need to be in place to attain a sustainable development, which certainly it is inclusive and green, addressing the many challenges now we are facing, the pandemic and supply chain disruption, and many from a sustainable development point of view. So sustainable development of the rubber economy mostly echo all the panelist speakers, various dimensions pointed out, but whether it is to be brought in from the perspective of a certification or it is only a visibility checking of what all action is going on in the supply chain of various raw material. But of course, what the sector as a whole to be addressed is a holistic approach addressing all these elements to attain a sustainable development for the rubber economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lekshmi. And we are already over time, I think, and we need to close very quickly. I just want to ask Vincent Gates if he wants to say a few words, and then we can conclude this event.
From here, perhaps, yes, perhaps better. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Salvatore. I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, but that just shows the richness of the perspective that we managed to gather. I really thank all the presenters for the very rich presentations. I think when we started to work with a bit closer with IRSG a few years ago, it was also based on from a research perspective, for development perspective, on the kind of the feeling that the rubber sector was underplayed in sustainable development and in climate, and it was in fact a critical sector in a way that it brings really all the dimensions together from economic, social, environmental, and we talk about that all the time, but in rubber we really see that it is a critical and a very special characteristic of the sector, and also looking at the roles between intersection between value chain, driving change through value chains, and then driving change through landscape, land use approaches, and all these two needs to interact. So what we see is it's emblematic for the green economy, and it's emblematic for sustainable development, but it makes it a bit more difficult as well, because it really requires coordinated action of of a broad range of actors, as many have said today. I will not cite all these actors again, but the idea is that there is, I think, a willingness to do things and a willingness to attract other actors that are perhaps currently less connected, climate change actors, finance, sustainable development, sustainable landscape finance sectors, and so on, to the transformational need of the rubber sector. And I would see, based on the exchanges today, three critical pathways for transformation. First, we need to share knowledge, gather it and share it, and indeed raise the visibility of natural rubber as a component of green growth to other sectors. And that's why we're bringing to the attention of the climate change community. We're really glad to talk now with the Green Climate Fund, because there are real needs in countries, and we really need to show that, in fact, rubber is a solution to some of the broad objectives. Then we need to put in place an enabling environment, not leaving the sector alone. I think there is a strong enabling environment already in place, but we need some mechanisms to enable sustainable practices and facilitate their recognitions by all actors. And we know that even certification is a bit of also a challenge there. Is there always a price primer to certification and so on? We need to make finance and sustainable development finance work for the sector. I think Apabor has mentioned that. We have here an opportunity, as I think Ben Vickers has said, because of the importance of making bonds between adaptation and mitigations, and the fact that that climate actions now is linked to sustainable development. The Paris Agreement has really recognized that this is a fundamental component, and smallholder based rubber system is basically an emblematic way to do sustainable development and social issues at the same time that you're doing climate action. And then the third pathway is really invest in research, upstream and downstream. Upstream because Robert and Aziz said at the beginning, rubber is close to forest, or the closest to forest, but it's also in a way the closest to agriculture and farming because of the potential for rubber agroforestry systems and so on. And we really have here perhaps even all the research to revitalize and invest in. And IRRDB has been, of course, fundamental into this. So far, there is probably an increased role for them even in the future. Downstream, new uses, adding values that will maybe also help solving a little bit the price problem, because if you add new uses, you add value, you may reduce price volatility. So in the future, when we look at our relation and building on what we've done with IRSG, IRRDB, CIRAD in the framework of the FTA research program that we're now in fact bringing to a new moment, because we yesterday launched the new FTA partnership. We really want to help this community of actors. I think we've talked, the GPSNR has been mentioned. Maybe it lacks a little bit, or we need to develop in a way of a form of a knowledge partnership as well, to bring the knowledge component a bit more strongly into this platform, and in fact help also IRSG as the main and major institution that brings all these actors together to develop, in fact, the pathways for the future. We have the idea of a guide that needs to help these actors for the sustainable development of rubber. It will need to be co-constructed. So that's an invitation to follow up on these discussions to make that a reality in the framework of the new FTA partnership, in which IRSG is associated with CIFOR, CIRAD, and many others. Thank you, Salvatore.
Thank you, Vincent. From my side, I just would like to say now, partnership that Vincent was mentioned before are extremely important between organizations that have one goal, and the goal here is to make this natural rubber sustainable, because it's a strategic raw material. We need the natural rubber today. We will need in the future for sure. So it's very important that we all collaborate, and in this collaboration, of course, the finance side has to be in there. The producing countries and governments has to be part of this, active part of these discussions, and we need really to do great work for providing also to smallholders an income that allow them to have a reasonable living, and also be able to implement sustainable agricultural practices in their own plantations. So I would like to thank everyone, all the speakers that have been here, the speakers online. We had, I think, 42 attendance online as well. So I think it was a great success from my side, and I would like to thank everyone once again. Thank you so much.